5 mistakes that I see most couples make when they're trying to transform their marriage, and then the shifts that you need correspondingly to address those mistakes, because they're super common. I do get some pushback on this and some of the things I'm going to share here from other therapists in the space, other couples counselors. It's not a mainstream way of looking at it, so I know in advance that I might get some flack around this, but in my experience, this is really what makes the difference. So the first mistake is waiting for your spouse to join you and not being willing to go first. Traditional marriage counseling treats the couple as the client. They both have to participate equally. They both have to come to every session. And so if one person doesn't want counseling or isn't available for it, or for whatever reason, they just don't really want to talk to somebody outside of their marriage, then they can't get the help that they need, right? Because it has to be billed under couples work. And if both people aren't there, then they can't bill for it. So that's why a lot of married couples who really love each other end up divorced, is because one person's ready and the other person isn't. And it's just mistimed readiness. It's not even really about a level of commitment. It's like maybe they just aren't lined up. One person's ready one time, and then by the time the other person is ready, first person's not ready anymore. And so that mistimed readiness is really the biggest issue. So you don't want to wait until you're both in the same place at the same time. You want to just go ahead and start on your own first. And I really do treat couples work as individual work that can be done in the presence of the other. So you have nothing to lose by just going first. It's essentially the same thing. It's nice if they can be there, and it's nice if you can share your insights and what you're learning with your partner. But so much of what gets in the way for couples is not so much about a dynamic. The dynamic is farther downstream. It's the individual issues that we have internally that are different from each other and very unique, that maybe we came to the relationship with before we even met our partner. That was already in us. So it's an individual thing. It's an individual trigger, an individual default mode or limiting belief that can get in the way. So if you can just say, I'm going to start with myself first and I'm going to look inward, that will allow you to catalyze radical transformation from the inside out. And the dynamics change as a result. Because if you've got two people in a dynamic and one person changes what they do and how they respond and how they feel and the energy they bring, there's no way that the dynamic isn't going to be changed. So you do have more power than you think that you do. I've seen people transform their whole marriage just from one person doing the work and the other person never joins. Now, a lot of times they'll join later, but if they don't, you can still save your marriage. It just depends on if you're dealing with a precondition. If they're dealing with a precondition, then I can't say that that's true. Then it's more just you're gambling, basically. But if you're not dealing with a precondition, there's nothing that says that you can't turn it around if the love is still there and your partner has not reached the point of no return. So the mindset shift, obviously for that common mistake is to say, I'm going to decide to do this. I'm going to make a commitment to being more relational, to be healthy in my relationships, no matter what my partner is doing. It does not matter what my partner is doing. They can continue to behave in ways that I don't like, but I'm going to respond differently. And that's very powerful. Now, the second mistake is working on the marriage through insight-based approaches that bypass the subconscious limiting beliefs, the default modes that will sabotage you, right? And most therapy only engages the prefrontal cortex. Most insight-based modalities of therapy, more and more we're moving into somatic modalities and EMDR and things that will draw from split brain research. But most of the time it's insight-based, and you can have a lot of insight, and that prefrontal cortex is very intelligent and it understands theoretical concepts, why you do what you do, why it's not a good idea, and what you should do differently next time. But if that knowledge doesn't filter into the subconscious programs, as soon as you get triggered, you're not going to remember that. You're not going to be able to access that information until once you're not triggered anymore. And it's kind of a tragedy in a way, because it's like you already know it, but the knowledge in and of itself isn't going to help you if you can't internalize it into your subconscious program so that your default modes change. I think that's why so many couples backslide. They might separate, or they might say, you know what, we're going to double down, we're going to get some help, and then things get better for a little while, because you can, with effort, override your default modes. But as soon as you get tired or under-resourced or triggered or stressed, or, the conditions aren't right, it's a muscle memory thing. It's like when you want to stop at the store on the way home and you end up at home, your muscle memory took over because you weren't thinking. There's no way that we as human beings can be always mindful until we've reached enlightenment. We just can't do it because we're human. So you don't want to rely on staying conscious in every moment. You want to know that if you're offline, if your prefrontal cortex is offline, that your muscle memory of your programs is going to still take you in the direction that you want to go. Those subconscious programs are 10 million times more powerful than your level of insight. Whatever you know intellectually cannot hold a candle to the power of those subconscious programs, even if all they are is just tapes that are being replayed over and over again. It's really maddening. But when you really embrace the truth of this experience, you realize that there is simply no way to create permanent change in your marriage unless you can actually internalize your insights into the subconscious. And so the most essential shift that comes out of this recognition is your willingness to do belief work, to change those limiting beliefs at the subconscious level. There's no way that I can overemphasize the importance of this. It is absolutely essential. Changing those limiting beliefs is going to support all the tools. You'll use the tools, you'll use the skills, you'll be able to do what it is that you decided you want to do differently when it really counts. That's what's going to make the difference. So you can still do the insight-based work. You have to do that, but also you want to supplement that with a willingness to go deep into the subconscious and reprogram, whether that's EMDR, whether that's hypnotherapy, NLP, psychological kinesiology, tapping. There's a lot of different modalities that you can use to change your limiting beliefs at the subconscious level. And I could do another talk about that another day. But right now, what I really want to get through is just that while most people resist this, even if they understand it, but they don't really do the actual work of changing their beliefs every day. That is what's going to make the difference. That's what's going to help you. So it's almost like if somebody has schizophrenia and they take medication and then the voices stop and then they feel better and then they don't want to take their meds anymore because they think they don't need them anymore. This happens a lot too in relationship work. You're feeling better. You're trying hard. You're using the prescription that's been given to you and then it's better. And so then you stop using it and you do backslide. Like we are creatures of habit. And if we don't recognize that, we're just not admitting our limits as a human being. So I think you really have to just say, even if it sounds inconvenient or like an extra step, the only way for these changes to really last that my spouse can count on, that I can count on, is to engage those limiting beliefs at the subconscious level, especially if you have trauma or a deep sense of unworthiness or physiological triggers that are getting in the way and sabotaging you. Now, the third mistake, and another really super common mistake that I see in the traditional modalities of couples counseling, is that they start with communication first, before you're emotionally connected, before you feel safe, before you even trust your partner to really hear and see you. You might be afraid of their judgment. You might feel like they're your enemy, they're your opponent. You've been in a me versus you mentality. And so it doesn't really matter if you learn a communication tool. And so it's like putting the cart before the horse, right? It's problematic because you have to feel safe and connected in order for the communication tools to actually land. The safety and the connection, that emotional connection, is what changes your perceptual filter to see your partner as your ally. And that changes everything. The way that you receive what they say is massively impacted by your felt sense of if they're an ally or not. Right? Think about it. If you're not feeling great about your spouse and they want to give you a piece of advice, you're not going to take that advice. You don't trust that it's coming from a good place. But when you're feeling connected emotionally, well, then you're on the same side of the table and you can have a difficult conversation with the deep knowing of like, hey, we're on the same side. I don't need to protect myself from them and they don't need to protect themselves from me. We're in this together and we're unifying against the pattern. It's not me versus you. It's us against the pattern. That's what emotional connection is. And so the shift that we have to make if we really are in crisis in marriage is to spend our energy on building that emotional connection first. How can I create safety in my relationship? How can you create that nonverbal sense of being felt and seen and understood? You can do that without talking. So one way that I distinguish between communication and emotional connection is that communication is cerebral. It requires language and cognition, whereas emotional connection doesn't require language. It can just require touch, physical presence, eye contact, nonverbal cues. It's prelingual. It's a primal sense of safety. And we do need that. We are wired for that sense of attachment to a primary person from birth. Obviously, as a baby, we need that sense of safety. We need our caregivers to be attuned to us in order to know that our needs will be met and for us to survive, right? If they're not attuned to us, we die. And obviously that's not the case as we become adults, but it feels that way. That's why sometimes people will fight to the death, right? Like, this is high stakes. I am going to fight for you to hear me, when really it's not a matter of life or death. It feels that way. That's why we crave that, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. And the attachment theory research has shown that this is normal. We need that connection and that safe attachment all the way through the end of our lives. And I think this is what people underestimate, the importance of that. And so they try to get the emotional connection through communication, but it's actually the emotional connection that will support successful communication. So focus on that. How can you help your spouse feel emotionally connected? And what do you need to feel emotionally connected? If maybe that's something you can articulate to your spouse. And if you can do that, like once you are connected, your spouse can give you feedback and you can hear it. You can hear it like, thank you for telling me that. But if you're not on the same side, you're going to be defensive and feel like they're mad at you, or, you need to like protect your reputation in their eyes. And then it becomes about something else. So that's why that's so key. Now, another huge mistake that I see couples counseling focus on is rehashing the problems, focusing on the problems, analyzing the problems, living in the world of the problems. And this makes sense, right? Because the mainstream approaches, they're diagnostic. They identify and they analyze symptoms. We're looking at a cluster of symptoms. We're diagnosing. And there's this sort of belief. I think the paradigm that we're operating from within a diagnostic model is that there's a problem that we have to fix. There are these symptoms that give us a label of what the problem is. And it's important, right? Because if we don't know what the condition is, we don't know how to treat it, right? If we think that we're dealing with depression and not bipolar disorder, and we get it wrong, well, then we could prescribe the wrong medication and that could have disastrous effects on people, right? So I understand it. I'm not trashing that. You have to know, what are we dealing with in order to know what the cure is or what the solution is. The problem is that when we stay there too long, I think that's the problem, is we stay there too long and we have this belief that we can't reconnect, we can't solve the problems, we can't feel close to our partner, we can't negotiate differences, we can't really have a connection or feel happy in our marriage until we've rectified the problems. And we feel like until we can solve this, I'm not even open to connecting with you. When really the shift that we need to move out of that is to expand the positive interactions, reduce the negative interactions, and have a good time and build some goodwill in the relationship. So make it a good relationship before you tackle the problems. That's so counterintuitive, I understand, because it's like, well, there's these problems that are under the rug and I don't want to avoid these problems. And especially if you are married to an avoidant, then, you're going to not like this idea. But it isn't a long-term thing. It's more of a temporary thing. We have to first come back into connection, build some warmth, build some positivity, build some trust, remember why we're with our person in the first place, and learn some skills, learn some new tools, do the inner work. Then we can come together and talk about the problems, because we have a completely different paradigm and a completely different skill set and a different level of confidence and a different emotional state that we're coming with. We just have all the resources that we don't have. We don't have those resources when we are problem focused. If we don't allow ourselves to build the positive and then come back to the problems, then we're never going to get out of it. It's kind of like a never ending cycle. What we focus on expands. What we bring our attention to, we magnify that which we bring our attention to. So if you're always trying to focus on the problems, well, everything you see is going to be an evidence of the problem. And how do you then break out of that? And how do you keep hope alive? How do you have motivation and a sense of promise? And how do you even notice you will be filtering out all evidence of positive things that are happening, or you'll be filtering out evidence of progress because you're so problem focused. And that is really sad to watch. So what you have to do is systematically expand the positive aspects of the marriage until the negative aspects become marginal. And the John Gottman ratio that he came up with from his research is 5-1, right? I'm sure you've all heard of this. It has to be 5-1 positive to negative, as defined by the couples. Is very subjective, but it is measurable. And for every negative interaction, you should have 5 positive interactions. And that's the minimum, right? Anything less than that, you're not on stable ground. You're probably like up and down, up and down, up and down. 50-50, you're in danger territory. But if you can get 10-1, 20-1, then you're on solid footing. That doesn't mean you don't have negative things. It's literally like all you have to do is expand the positive interactions and you haven't even touched the problems. But if you can marginalize them first by expanding the positive, well, now you have more resources to go back. They just feel way less overwhelming. It's just a fraction proportionally now of what you have to deal with, and you feel so much stronger. So that's why that's so powerful. And I like it because it is measurable. It is something you can track. And so you just have to think about, okay, what do I want? What do I want to create? What is a positive interaction? What would my partner think is a positive interaction? And how can I create that, and focus on building what you want rather than trying to navigate and be upset about what you don't want. That's the key. That's a major shift. And then the final mistake that I see is that we forget that we are really the product of who we surround ourselves with. And we stay isolated doing couples work. So many couples don't even want to tell anybody that they're in counseling because there's shame around it. And I get it. It's private. It's nobody's business. But I can't help but think that a lot of times it comes from a place of shame, right? It is a personal thing, but every marriage has struggles. If you're going to have a long marriage, There's no way that you can escape having challenges at times. So if we just normalize that, it doesn't have to be done shrouded in secrecy. It can be something that you get help for, but also really what I'm saying is not just getting help like a counselor or a mentor or a therapist to help you, but a community of people I think is so important. And I don't see that enough with couples work. I think you have to have both. I think you have to have the private help, the support with somebody who can help you professionally. A neutral outside person is super valuable, but it's so important to be connected to other people that are walking the same talk, that are learning the same language, that are on the same journey, that can relate to the challenges, but also are inspired by the successes. And when you have a community of peers that are inspiring each other and lifting each other up, and they know that they're not alone, and you realize how much more common what you're experiencing is, there's less shame, there's more acceptance, self-acceptance, which then of course allows us to come forward and take risks and have a leap of faith and to try something new and lean into the new experiences of relational health, even though it might feel terrifying, like being vulnerable, giving feedback, receiving feedback in a non-defensive way, right? These are all things that require us to take personal risks in order to learn how to do it. But if you're in a community, so often I feel like the support that other members are giving each other in the group is so much better than I could ever provide. It's way different when you're just in the hot seat and the counselor's asking you questions than it is to be listening to others that you can completely relate to, or they're sharing something that helps you understand your partner's perspective a little bit better. That is very different than hearing it from a therapist. It really is. It's like, oh, okay. And it's a different power dynamic. There's a different level of validation. And these are relationships and connections that you take with you beyond the therapy, right? Now you're connected to people that know what relational health is. They know how to create it. They know what the pitfalls are. And now you have new friends, you have new community members that it's like being in a like-minded fellowship, right? Just like people like to find fellowship in their churches or in their volunteer communities or their missions of like, I want to find other people who share those values and we're in this together and we're discovering agencies and resources and things that we can do together. That's what this is like, right? Finding not just mentorship privately, but also being in a community. And I do believe, this is my opinion, that it is required for leveling up and ultimate mastery is to be in a community of people that are doing the same thing. And I don't think, just as an aside, it's a good idea to take advice from unhappily married people. If you're getting advice from people that don't know how to have a successful marriage, that are divorced and unhappy and complaining, or maybe they're married, but they're always complaining about their spouse, you don't want to get marriage advice from folks like that. You want to find people that have achieved what it is that you want. And that's true for any area of life, right? Whether that's a career that you're trying to build or a mastery in martial arts or art. If you want to climb Mount Everest, you're not going to just take off by yourself. You're going to do some research. You're going to find some groups. You're going to figure it out. You don't have to reinvent the wheel is what I'm trying to say. So bottom line is that couples counseling does have notoriously poor outcomes. And so find a different path that incorporates these shifts that I've talked about. There's a few things that you want to look for. You want to find something with high support, high traction, and support between sessions, not just once a week, 50 minutes, or once every 2 weeks, 50 minutes, where you just scratch the surface, rehash everything, and then come back next week and do the same thing, right? Because it's just not enough. It's just a Band-Aid when you need something much deeper. You want to find somebody that will really support the inner focus, the triggers, and the subconscious programming, that understands how to help you reprogram old limiting beliefs and old default modes, and not just in a cerebral way, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy is fantastic. I've been trained in it. I use it. I love the theory behind it. But I do believe you want to find somebody that can help you take those principles and incorporate them into something in a modality that will speak to the subconscious and not just this part of your brain up here. Also, you want somebody that really understands emotional connection first. A lot of therapists that are familiar with the work of Sue Johnson, you could ask, and you can find this even on Psychology Today, or you can search people online and you can look for, it's called EFT, emotion focused therapy. There are people that are certified in that. Those types of therapists really have a deep understanding of the importance of emotional connection before communicating, creating that safety, and they have a very well-established modality to help you do that. You also want to look for some kind of support where there's structure and daily work, some kind of embodiment of what you're learning. It's not just enough to have those insights. Like, for example, I love Dr. Orna on couples therapy. I don't know if you guys have seen her. It's becoming more popular now. She was just interviewed on Jay Shetty. I love her. If you guys are interested, check it out. I can't remember what platform she's on, but she is brilliant, brilliant insight. She just knows exactly what's going on. She does so much with so few words. And yet there's not a lot of advice. There's not a lot of tools. It's a psychodynamic modality that is very insight oriented. I think there's this assumption that like once you get it, well, now you can go make a change. And that is true. You have to see it first. You have to understand it first, but you just want to make sure that you've got somebody that's having you do assignments, practicing things so that you can embody what you learn and you can bring it from a theoretical knowing and into your body so that it becomes your new muscle memory and your new habits. You absolutely can have new habits. If you've ever quit smoking, if you've ever quit drinking, if you've ever learned new skills in parenting that have become second nature, you know that this is true. So it's really just a matter of making that the priority, I think. So if you're in crisis, time is working against you. If you're on the brink, if you feel like your spouse is like 1 foot out the door, you definitely want to double down and prioritize your marriage work. I think you want to make your marriage as important as the wedding. You want to make it as important as a trip or your job or a career or a kitchen remodel, anything that has been important to you that would require your time and attention and focus and resources. Once you have that solid primary attachment and connection, and you're kind of living in an abundance of love and connection, and you're no longer in conflict and scarcity around that, everything else is more enjoyable in your life anyways. I mean, obviously, I think nothing else matters more because I'm biased. This is what I do, but I've been through the worst. I've been separated. I didn't think my marriage would make it twice. So I just have personal experience with feeling like it's worth it, because I did come out the other side and I see people do come out the other side. So I say that just to leave hope. If you're frustrated, if you feel like, it hasn't worked for me, it might be because of these mistakes, these common pitfalls that people experience in traditional marriage work. So I hope that that's helpful, and I will now turn it over to questions.